Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for sticking with the program. We've got an excellent panel here and now for the next hour. You'll notice that from a sartorial point of view, we're a slight contrast to the last speaker. Though Joey in the middle, I think, is just about someone who Kevin would want to talk to, but certainly the rest of us, although we're not bald, you know, we've got all of the other negative attributes that Kevin would want to avoid. So we're here in stark contrast to the last speaker, complementing, not competing with, but complementing the last speaker. And the title of this session is Show Me the Money. Not show me the dream, show me the money that's needed to fund the dream. So we've got 4 super panelists. I'm going to just interview them individually as we proceed from my right down the row. And first up, we're going to hear from Mr. Connolly, who is Tom Connolly, who's EVP and Chief Innovation Officer of DuPont. And, you know, when you read Tom's CV, it's a fantastic CV of a scientist graduated from Princeton and Cambridge, was for some years with other companies, but then became the Chief Science and Technology Officer of DuPont in 2001, Executive Vice President in 2006, and also Chief Innovation Officer. So we're really interested, Tom, to learn from you how do you go about finding the money in DuPont, but more importantly, for the very new ventures that some of your people come up with in the labs that somehow or other seem way out, but perhaps deserve to get funded. How does that happen?
Okay. I'll be happy to respond to that question. There is enough money around, but perhaps it's in the wrong places. Large cap companies tend to hang on to their cash and protect their balance sheet. Right now, externally, a lot of the venture capital and private equity guys are sitting on cash, et cetera. Within a company, we have the advantage of not having to worry about that in quite the same way. So I would say each of our existing businesses fund their research. We do that in a very undemocratic way. Some units will spend 1% of their budgets on technology. Others will spend greater than 10% of their budgets on technology. And the amount we invest in innovation doesn't map to where today's business is. It maps to where we view the next opportunities are. So we do invest where we think there are opportunities for growth. I would say there's invention activities that occur in the laboratory. Innovation occurs in the marketplace because an innovation hasn't occurred until value has been captured. So we create something, we take that product to the marketplace, we create value with the customer, and we share that value. And if there's a point as we make those allocations of scarce resources, I think we need to deal with 3 elements of uncertainty. First is the marketplace. What is the customer need? What is the need today? What is the future need going to be? Secondly, the technology uncertainty. Can we develop the responsive technology? What technology do we have today, and what technology do we believe we can develop? And the third thing is execution uncertainty. Can we do what we say we're going to do? Have we put the team in place? And believe me, a startup team in a company is no different from a startup team in a new company. And that is to say, you've got to assemble the necessary skills to get the job done. And really, success in an entrepreneurial activity is about managing those 3 sources of risk or uncertainty: around the market, around the technology, and around your ability to execute.
Is the word entrepreneur used at DuPont?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is a skill set. It can be learned, but there's something intrinsic. We talk about having the right phenotype. You know it when you see it. There's a certain drive and a certain fearlessness that the entrepreneur has, and part of that can be taught or cultivated, but part of it, I believe, is innate.
Okay. And there might even be serial entrepreneurs at DuPont.
Absolutely.
That specialize in
absolutely
bringing something to market.
People who get bored easily, and once they have a success, they're looking for that next opportunity. Okay,
super. All right, so perfect segue to Joey Ito, who is the director of the MIT Media Lab, a very prestigious position. Some of you will know the name of Nicholas Negroponte, who early on conceived the Media Lab. It's become a great force for creative invention and innovation. And Joey is an entrepreneur. He's been a venture capitalist. He does a lot of work in the not-for-profit area. He's really one of the foremost experts on the internet. Joey, what do you think?
So I'll qualify my remarks by saying that I'm focused primarily on internet and things that are like the internet, which is things that have open access, the ability to innovate without asking permission, and it's really this kind of innovation on the edges. Because I think the fundamental thing that the internet did was it dramatically lowered the cost of collaboration, the cost of innovation, and the cost of distribution. And it also made things much faster, much more complex, and much less predictable. And so one thing I do agree with previous speaker was that the world has a lot more uncertainty and chaos going on. And there's this great book, The Black Swan, that everybody cites all the time, but just about every interesting negative thing and positive thing was unanticipated. And even those that were somewhat anticipated, like the earthquake in Japan, every plan we had failed. So I personally think plans, including business plans, are overrated. And I think that just about every interesting thing in my space comes from stuff where you don't actually know beforehand. So the way we innovate, both at the Media Lab and in my startups, is we don't sit around and talk about stuff. We don't sit around and plan stuff. We just build stuff. Because the cost of building a minimum viable product, whether it's an internet startup or something in the Media Lab, say a prototype for a new electric vehicle, the cost of making it is cheaper than the cost of a bunch of old guys sitting around talking about it. And so, like in Japan, we have these things called feasibility companies that we do feasibility studies. The average cost, I would say, is about $3 million. I remember sitting in one for a whole year arguing about whether to invest $300,000, and they spent $3 million to decide not to invest $300,000. And as we know with startup companies, the most you will ever lose is the money you put in, which is very different from a DuPont or a big company where you could actually lose more because of all this collateral loss. So the key to, I think, startup stuff, entrepreneurs in the startup space, is to minimize the risk, not by worrying about the risk, but by making the bets very small and very fast. And the thing that's really neat about the Media Lab, and I figured this out sort of as I got there, is that you can do this not just in internet startups. You can do this with hardware. You can do this with biology. You can do this with chemistry, because all of these scale, the cost of manufacture has gone down. So I can imagine my students starting to compete with the DuPonts of the world, because we have a lab where we can build this stuff, because the ability to connect with other people doing it and the ability to distribute has gone down so much. And lastly, I'll say, again, this whole point, like our research at the Media Lab is very unique in that it's completely undirected. We have 70, 80 companies that give us money, but they don't tell us what to do. We just do whatever we want to do, because by definition, if you have to write a proposal. It means somebody who is less intelligent, or at least less aware of that particular space than the student, has to understand it enough to give you the money, which basically means you have to give them the answer before you've asked the question, which limits the scope of the research. So big companies are very good at innovating and being entrepreneurs along a certain track where they sort of know where they want to go. But when you're trying to invent the next iPod, or you're trying to invent the next Facebook, you've got to ask questions where you don't know the answer. YouTube was a dating site first, and then it became Flickr with video, and then it became MySpace video distribution. PayPal was a mobile app. None of these things look at all like what they ended up becoming successful with. So I, again, just as an early stage investor, I look at the people and I look at the general trajectory and their ability to innovate, but I don't try to hold them to a plan, because the plan is going to cost too much. and it's usually going to be wrong.
Okay. So if I'm a scientist at the MIT Media Lab, I'm extraordinarily privileged because I have access to a pool of funds that corporations have donated, but without any strings attached. How do you allocate the fund use, or is that not even an issue? There's no constraint on resources. It sounds like a very privileged environment in which to be developing ideas. What do you say to people who don't have access to that kind of privilege?
Well, I think we have kind of a unique situation. I think it's difficult to replicate because we have a critical mass of 300 or 400 scientists working on really, really interesting stuff, and the ability to attract some of the smartest kids, partially because of MIT. So we do, every couple of years, knock something out of the park. We invented digital ink. We invented, Lego Mindstorms. We invented a lot of the early PC stuff. So we know we have a track record, and because we have, 70 or 80 sponsors who share, it's around $200,000 to get the minimum in. They share the cost of this kind of advanced research, and just about every company comes back every year because we have over 300 projects. So as long as they get inspired by a couple of things. So if it were a smaller lab, you wouldn't get this kind of portfolio bet that you're making when you're betting on the Media Lab. So I think it would be hard to replicate because it happened when Nicholas started. It happened during a period where you could get all these people together to invest in a lab like this. I think today it'd be a little bit more difficult.
Right. But can you just say a word to some of the people in the audience who may be trying to start something that has a basis in science but don't necessarily have access to the funding that you have easy access to? Is it tough in your mind to find the money? We've heard a couple of times during the conference that money is not the problem, that there's no shortage of money to fund startups and entrepreneurs. Is that the case?
Yeah, so I think it's hard to find the right money. So the Media Lab, it's still hard for me to find the strategic money, even if it's the same company, like if you go to Dow. If you get it from a particular group that's looking for a solution for a particular problem, that's not the money we want. We want the money from the Chief Innovation Officer or the CEO who wants to they want us to think of something they haven't thought of yet, which is actually hard money to find. And it's the same for the entrepreneur. I've seen more companies ruined by the investors than by the CEO. You can fire the CEO, you can't fire the investors. And so what you want, when I look at a company, I look at the investors first, and when I'm investing in a company, it's almost like Mission Impossible. You pick the best investors you can find. You say, I want to do the Middle East, so I'll get Fadi, and I want to do distribution in Japan, so I'm going to get this guy. And the investors are actually part of the team in an early stage startup. So the money is there, but the investor's time is really the limiting resource in creating as many companies as I'd like to.
So that I think is really a great point, that there's the right money and there's the wrong money. The money may be there, you can find it, but you want to find the right money.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Let's go next to Takumi Shibata. Takumi has been with Nomura for, I think it's over 30 years. But he's had practically every job in practically every country that you could have. So, as far as Japanese bankers and investors are concerned, I think, there's no one I know who has a more global perspective, both in terms of range of industry and also range of banking activities and range of countries in which he's lived and worked than Takumi. So he's now the group CEO of Nomura Holdings, and previously ran Nomura's European business from London, its global investment banking operations from Tokyo, global wholesale business from Tokyo, et cetera, et cetera. So Takumi, Keio University, and I'm also proud to say a former student of mine at Harvard Business School as well. Just a wonderful, wonderful Japanese business person. So Takumi, how should our friends here find the money?
The first advice is not to take money for granted.
Not to take money from?
For granted. In other words, 40% of actually last year, 25% of IPOs got pulled or canceled. And I tend to agree with Mr. Ito in that advice number one to you as an entrepreneur is to select your investors and select your investors wisely. People tend to think that the investors would choose you. But if they can choose you, you should select them. It's very important that the investment philosophy of yours is the same with the investment philosophy of venture capitalists. And also, you need to ask questions about their ability to invest more into your company as you grow, because you certainly need more money when you want to make sure that you would grow into the future. The failure of having the wrong kind of investors would basically waste your money, waste your time, and minimize your chance of success. So advice number one is to choose your investors carefully. Advice number two is try to think of a portfolio of investors in your company. As Professor Ito stated, it's good to have investors with brain. It's good to have investors with the connections. And it's good to have investors with technological knowledge. And in the absence of those additional value that the investors can bring to the company, you're wasting your opportunity. So think of portfolio of diversified shareholders base when you launch your company. And third advice is that you want to make sure that you look for investors from wider universe these days. And there are corporate venture capitalists who would essentially be looking to opportunities to put their money at work. Some are very strategic, some are more financially oriented, but the important thing is that you need to spare no effort to find a better investor mix in your company. Advice number 4 is try not to become psychologically unemployable when you start a business. Once you start a business, you're boss of your own company. But the market is such that venture capitalists who is funding you might wish to sell your company to a strategic buyer, large cap strategics, or they might wish to sell you to a portfolio company or private equity firms. And if that happens, you become head of a division and you cease to be owner of your own company. And it is very important that you would be psychologically ready not to become psychologically unemployable when you take somebody's money. And last piece of the advice is that still IPO market is wonderful. It's everybody's dream. Investment bankers, stockbrokers, institutional investors need to participate in your IPO. So those are 5 pieces of advice to entrepreneurs who want to raise money. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Very, very clearly stated. Thanks very much, Takumi. So we'll go next to David Wilhelm, who's had really sort of 2 careers, and some of you may recognize David's name because probably in the public marketplace he's best known for having been the head of the Democratic National Committee, chairman of the DNC. He ran the 1992 presidential campaign of Bill Clinton. And also ran campaigns for Vice President Biden, for Richard Daley, the mayor of Chicago, and the late U.S. Senator from Illinois, Paul Simon. And after his stint in the world of Washington, he's then become a full-time entrepreneur and a part-time academic. And I can tell you from my personal experience that that's a hell of a lot more profitable than what I do, which is be a full-time academic and a part-time entrepreneur. He's got an organization called New Harvest Ventures, which is a venture capital fund that's investing in projects that are in disadvantaged rural areas of the United States, and probably enterprises that would have a lot of trouble ordinarily finding the necessary funds to get started. So a very interesting story. David, over to you.
Well, thank you. Show me the money. I've got to say this. It comes from a great movie called Jerry Maguire. Have you ever seen it? Jerry Maguire is played by Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is a sports agent who becomes disgusted with the unethical business practices of the larger agency for which he works, writes a memo about it, gets fired, and in response decides to start his own business. So it's one of the great movies about entrepreneurship. And at the end of the movie, his business succeeds and he gets the girl, and that's what always happens for entrepreneurs. Well, I want to make a couple of points here. First of all, I frequently hear at conferences like this that there's plenty of money out there for early stage and seed stage businesses. I don't see it. Maybe there is in Silicon Valley, but in non-financial centers of the United States, and I would guess far beyond the borders of the United States, we've been disinvesting as a country, as institutional investors in early stage and seed stage sectors of the economy for a long time. In the ramp up to the recession, the Great Recession, the percentage of total private equity dedicated to seed stage companies dropped from 16% in 1995 to 4% in 2007. 10 private equity companies controlled 28% of all private equity. They were not making investments in small companies. So in the ramp up to the recession, money was being pulled out of early stage and seed stage companies and put into later stage private equity, LBOs, and credit default swaps and financial instruments like that. No one could possibly argue that the reason we had the Great Recession was that we had too much entrepreneurial activity. The problem was we didn't have enough of it. The problem was we averted our gaze and became imbued with prospects associated with financial instruments that were several times divorced from real business building and real customers. And so I just think that's an important point. Now we've had the Great Recession. And investors, I'm not sure whether they've learned the right lesson or not. If you pick up the Wall Street Journal from last week, you'll see a story that M&A activity for venture-backed companies fell by 17% from last year's level, which wasn't a bang-up year. And there's another headline where venture-backed IPOs continue to slide in terms of number and total value. There are 56% fewer venture capital companies in the United States right now that are making 3 or more investments a year compared to 2 or 3 years ago. Are banks lending to seed stage and early stage companies? Not where I live. I'm not feeling the love. So it is tough. I don't want to sugarcoat it. It is tough to raise money for an early stage growth company in the United States. My guess is in Europe, and my guess is around the world. So when I hear there's plenty of money, I say, show me the money. Where is that money coming from, and how do you organize yourself to benefit from the money that's out there? Well, first of all, you've probably heard the term ecosystem mentioned several times during the course of this conference. An ecosystem refers to locally organized venture capital activity, or an angel network that might be organized locally, or the existence of operational assistance for startup and early stage companies. One piece of advice is get involved in that ecosystem in your country, in your community, become known to the investors. That mitigates risk from their standpoint. Those ecosystems are there for a reason. Get involved in them. Couple other things I would encourage you to do is to mitigate risk by becoming revenue focused and customer focused. You've probably heard that a number of times during this conference. That's great advice, because after the recession, investors are not believing the hype. They are nervous about investing in early stage and seed stage companies, whether they should be or not. And so to the extent that you're able to show the marketplace, you are able to show investors that you've mitigated risk associated with your technology, that you understand the pipeline from which future customers will come, you will have gone a long way towards alleviating that risk. Find people that share your sense of purpose and mission. That matters. You've heard it said several times that, look, we're all here to make money. We're here to make money for investors. But in my experience, and I think there's plenty of data to support it, the companies that make the most money are companies that have the greatest sense of purpose about something other than making money. They're creating public value, social value, beyond just shareholder value. And the irony is that those are the very companies that wind up making the most shareholder value. So do those things, and I think in the long run, this will be of benefit to countries like this one and regions of the country like the American Midwest where I live. To the extent that the marketplace is shifting to companies that are more modest in their sense of what they're worth, companies that are customer-focused, companies that have a shorter ramp-up to profitability, that's going to benefit our part of the country because that's where we live. That's how we conduct ourselves. Nobody needs to teach us that. So I have plenty of hope. I have great hope for this region of the world when it comes to entrepreneurship. I have great hope for the region of the United States that I come from. Thank you.
Thank you, David. David, just a quick comment on the role, if any, of the of government and the public sector in stimulating funding where, for whatever structural reasons, there doesn't appear to be available money. Any role, or should it be just left to the market?
Well, I think there's an enormous role for states like the state I come from the state of Ohio. I always remember from my initial microeconomics class, one of the initial assumptions was assume the distribution of wealth and capital in society. Well, if you grew up in Appalachia, which is where I grow up and work, you are not going to assume the existing distribution of wealth and capital in society. You need to organize yourselves so that you're going to get your fair share of that wealth. And so I think there's a very important, I think a critical role for state governments. I think there's a critical role for the federal government in the promotion and organization of seed stage and early stage venture capital, in the promotion and organization of angel networks, and in the organization of operational assistance for high growth companies. I think it's critical. I think it's perfectly appropriate. And it's the way a state like Ohio, which has committed to that, will succeed in this highly competitive international marketplace.
Takumi, in Japan, what about this early stage and seed capital problem? Same as David has described, and how do big banks or the government help things there, if at all?
Number one, the environment for entrepreneurs in the USA is much more friendly than the environment for entrepreneurs in Japan. Number one, Japan has a number of venture capitalists, but they specialize in second round and pre-IPO investments. And there aren't anybody who specialize in the sort of seed capital apart from a very small number of university-related endeavors. And in terms of monetary amount, that's minuscule. The other challenge for the society over there is that if you have to start a company and if you have to raise money, you need to give personal guarantee to the loans that you get from big commercial banks. So if that venture fails, your life is ended. And that is a huge contrast to the freedom that the US entrepreneurs would have, in that they can try, they can fail one time, they can try and fail twice, and it could well be that they are 3 times lucky. So in terms of the startups, it's essentially people who are betting whole life.
Okay. Thomas, from your perspective, based in the US, how do you see the shortage of capital for those early stage enterprises? Any role for government? Anything that DuPont, through some sort of corporate responsibility type initiative, sure, is doing in this area?
Sure. Well, as a company, we certainly participate in the world of ventures and startups. We have a group called DuPont Ventures. We work with startup companies really around the world. We'll take equity positions in them. Sometimes we have joint development agreements or marketing arrangements with them. So I think any large cap company really needs to be aware of what's going on in the world of ventures and startups and participating when we have a strategic interest in the market. With regard to government, I think at the local level, maybe at the regional level, regional governments, local governments can participate. I think of initiatives that I'm familiar with in the U.S. Early Stage East, an organization along the East Coast that brings together, helps startup businesses write business plans and really get going. First State Innovations in my home state of Delaware does the same thing, organizes angel investors, brings them together with entrepreneurs. At that local level, I see a strong role. At the national level, and this may be a U.S. perspective, at the national level, I'm not sure I see a role. The role of government isn't to pick winners or losers. The role of government isn't to take venture-type risks without venture-type rewards. But government can provide stable policy. Nothing business likes less than uncertainty. So stable, predictable policies, even roadmaps for various areas of technology are extremely helpful. Pre-competitive research grants to our universities in areas of crucial importance and crucial technologies. These are all useful things that I think we can do at the national level, leave the entrepreneurship more at the local level.
Okay. Just one other question. I'm not sure if DuPont is a member of the MIT media.
Interesting, if you permit me a sidelight, we do have a DuPont MIT alliance. We struck a special deal with the Institute about how we would work with the Institute. The Media Lab had their own way of doing business and it wouldn't crack their business plan. So we work with the rest of the institution, but the Media Lab has gone its own way. As one of the researchers at MIT said, this feels more like DARPA than it does like the National Science Foundation. DARPA is the defense research program in the U.S., and we said we felt just about right. So we do have a more targeted rather than a general approach to R&D with MIT.
So who are the companies that are funding the Media Lab? What kind of companies?
It's actually quite broad. I mean, we have everyone from, Northrop Grumman to Mars to Gibson Guitar to Toshiba to just Fidelity. It's a pretty broad range. But I want to make a point on first of all, I think it's important to separate at least 2 broad categories of entrepreneurs. There's small and medium-sized businesses, like the shawarma shops and things like that. And then there are the people who are trying to build the next Google. A very, very different category. And there's a lot of role for government in creating the entrepreneurs making small and medium-sized companies, enterprises, whatever you want. But the real least sliver of entrepreneurs trying to build the next Google, they have a different kind of role, and the VCs in that space have a different role. But they also, even though it's a small percentage, they have a massive impact on everything, politics, on the economy. And so you have to separate them out because they're very, very different. And when you focus on the really, really sort of internet, scalable, massive impact, there isn't as much of lack of capital. Because I think that fundamentally, by definition, I would say show me the product. Because if you look at Facebook, Google, Twitter, Yahoo, they all had products with customers going crazy before they raised any money. And so for me, almost every company I've invested in recently, I've invested after they're growing massively, they already have a product, because the cost of building a product, all of those, Facebook, Yahoo, Google, they're all still students when they make these companies. They build these things in the dorm, they connect it to the internet. It's kind of a no-brainer to invest in these companies, right? So for those companies, and if you're an entrepreneur, that's the one thing the advice piece I would give is, don't write a PowerPoint. Spend the energy. In 3 weeks, you can, if you have an engineer, you can knock out a minimum viable product, get it out there, figure it out, get some users. And if you're growing, then you can get it. Now, this is, and then there's stuff in between SMEs and the massive sort of internet startups, which gets a little bit tricky because you may need more capital before you can build a product. But the really easy stuff that gets funded a lot, where I think we talk about there being enough money, are those companies where it's kind of obvious, you know, but even the obvious ones, some of them fail. You know, most of them fail, but it's not as hard to raise money for those.
All right, okay. Thanks, Joey. Now we've got about 10 minutes left, so I think we'll go to the audience if we could and take 3 or 4 questions. So can we keep our questions succinct, please? And if you want to direct the question at a particular individual, please. Make that clear. I think there's a question over on my left here. Yes, number 4.
Yes, I want to ask about venture capital. I keep hearing that the countries need a strong base of venture capital to raise startups and entrepreneurs, that they needed venture capitalists to start their companies. So my question is, how dangerous for a startup in early stages to go to a venture capital? If it's innovative, if it's internet-based and it's a promising idea, is it a good idea to go to a venture capital and get all the money that they need in early stages when the concept of the product or the service is yet to be matured and their market is not matured enough? Thank you.
Okay, who would like to take the question on venture capital? Please.
Let me make a comment. Venture capital is very expensive money. Their expectation of return is higher than other sources of funding, but they are willing to put money at risk. So my advice would be to go as far as you can in developing your idea and developing your plan for that idea before you talk to the venture capitalists. If you can find funding from your family, from angel investors, and delay the point at which you need that venture funding, I think you'll be able to make your value proposition more clearly and probably establish a higher initial valuation for your venture. You get to a stage where you probably need that type of funding, but keep in mind their expectation on return is going to be very high.
Other panel members agree?
Totally.
I think, if I were to add, basically, you know, venture capitalists are there to invest in semi-established companies. So they tend not to invest in ideas only. But those who are with some early ideas try to find occasions whereby some of consulting firms and some of accounting firms are giving free advice as a part of social contribution over the weekend. And those are the people that you want to compare notes with. And I think otherwise, there is make sure that you approach venture capitalists as late as possible, as you stated, so that you don't waste your precious stake.
Okay, good.
I would add that there's a category called angel investors who are earlier than venture capitalists. But the problem is I don't invest now unless it's referred to somebody that I know and trust. So it's hard to find them. But if you can find somebody, a good angel investor will give you advice. It's very close to friends and family. But it's good, actually not a bad idea to talk to professional investors to kind of get a sense of what they might want. And so I spend a lot of my time helping companies figure out where, and I may not be investing, but getting advice from a good investor is not a bad idea. And there are a lot of individual investors that do that. Unfortunately, I think in this region it's a little bit harder because we don't have the ecosystem. I know we're developing it here, and I think it's going to grow exponentially. But I think that's one key element of the ecosystem.
Okay, let's take another question, please. Let's see. There's a gentleman, yes, at number 2. Let's go there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Fawaz Al-Otaibi. I have a question for Mr. Ito. Concerning the venture capitalists at the MIT Media Lab, you mentioned that it's kind of free money, as you can say, that no strings are attached. They have no say in what exactly they want their money invested in. What do they gain out of investing in the MIT Media Lab? Thank you.
So they're actually not investors. They're funders. They actually get non-exclusive rights to all the intellectual property. Although I think, having talked to the CEOs that have been, some of the companies have been around for decades, their main value is that they go back home and they make an important decision differently because of something they saw at the Media Lab. So the Media Lab is slightly different. For most companies, they're not looking for startup companies and spin-outs. They're looking for the Media Lab to tell them that something they're doing is very wrong or that they should be in a new area. That's what most of the funders do. We do have a lot of venture capitalists around the Media Lab who invest in student startups. We probably have a dozen student startups every year. I'm trying to make it a little bit more organized, but they're not getting equity by giving to the Media Lab.
Okay, I think there was a gentleman. Can't see it anymore. Let's go with number 2.
Mr. Takumi Sang, Moskari Maska, Bochuchidinna. Business is doing well here in Saudi Arabia. My name is Yahab Al-Samanoudi. I'm a very fast entrepreneur growing business. And where do you see high growth businesses in the region, especially in Saudi Arabia? And in which industry you think that this will work?
If the question is about business opportunities in India, that is the one country that the Japanese are underinvested. And if you have to look at the major Japanese corporations making foreign direct investment, China comes first, and then it's typically China plus one strategy, and that one can be Thailand, that one can be Vietnam. But good story is that finally Japanese have started discovering India. And lots of my clients, big corporations are sending their chief executives over to India to find sort of a new business opportunities. And one thing unique in India is that you're much better off having a local partner than doing your own business on a standalone basis, because localities are different. The local governments are always difficult to deal with. And also, some of the cultural aspects of doing business is very unique. So I do think that we are going to see a surge of Japanese investment, especially by big corporations, trying to expand abroad, finding a very, the home for investments in India, and southern India too.
All right. Let's take this gentleman here, number 3. Thank you.
Hi, hello. This is Firas Al-Sugair from Awazil Company. I have a question here. We have been talking all the day about customers and listen to your customers. And if you are an entrepreneur, sometimes you have to start a new business. And this new business is a new idea. And the new idea nobody knows about and they will not embrace, they will not like. slowly, you can build the customer base and the relationship with the customers. So I'll leave this question open to whomever would like to answer it, but how can we develop as entrepreneurs this critical thing of going blind with uncertainty? Thank you.
Okay, so this is really getting at the discontinuous innovation versus the continuous innovation. Joey?
Actually, I think this is a really important thing for internet entrepreneurs to understand, that 99% of internet companies fail, not because the product is cool, but because they have no customers. And I always say the first 3 important things of any internet company is distribution, distribution, distribution. Every single successful internet company, the main innovation was on how they got massive scale through distribution. YouTube, it was hooking into MySpace. PayPal, it was hooking into eBay. Hotmail, it was a link at the bottom. So the innovation on the product is customer focused, but the way you address the customer's need is through innovating on the product. If you don't think about the customer all day long, you're not going to have a successful internet product. And so it is customer oriented. The biggest difference is at the internet, you have to assume you're dead when you're started. It's because you have no customers. So most big companies, they're living and trying not to die. Well, internet, you're dead, and you're trying to become alive. The default is you stay dead, right? And so when you get customers is when you start to come alive. Yeah. But it's still very, very customer focused, but it's about future customers.
And
David?
That sort of refers to the earlier question. Revenue is the best form of capital, and if you have revenue, you can avoid the venture capitalists. And that's often a very good thing. But the taking of an idea and turning it into a business really does benefit from, and in many ways requires, the creation of an infrastructure, of an ecosystem, of places that you can go to access the wisdom of mentors, to work with people who have done it before, to work with people that have substance area competence and expertise. I do a lot of work in Appalachia in the United States, which is a poor part of our country. And we do not have these kinds of ecosystems for the most part. And we have worked very hard over the course of the past decade to create those ecosystems, to create mentoring systems, to create angel networks where none existed before. It can be done. And when it's done, a resource extraction area of our country like ours that has been treated like a colony by the rest of our country over and over and over again begins to build its own wealth and its own indigenous businesses. And it is a very, very important aspect of, I think, an intelligent approach to economic development.
Okay, thanks. Thomas, do you have anything further on this issue?
Just a quick comment. We get involved in business, and it's easy to forget the customer, but revenue is the lifeblood of a business, and it only comes from your customers. Half of business is about people and the relationships and the customer, and any successful business, be it an internet business or a business-to-business business or a business-to-consumer business, can never forget the importance of the customer.
All right, so I think that's a very good, strong piece of advice on which to end the session. Want to thank everybody on the panel for being with us. The 2 things that I'd underscore are, first of all, show me the money. Well, the money isn't evenly distributed or evenly available. And then secondly, that there's right money and there's wrong money. I think that came through very clearly as well. So thanks for sticking with us through the end of the afternoon, and please join me in thanking the panel again. Thank you.